"Pretend to be my husband," the millionaire told the single father. His answer shocked everyone before the story begins. "Wherever life has placed you today, this message is for you." The floors of Hale Tower gleamed like mirrors at 5:30 in the morning, and Joseph Miller was the reason why. He moved the mop in long, careful strokes, working his way down the 42nd floor hallway in silence, the kind of silence that only exists before the world wakes up. The overhead lights hummed softly. His reflection moved beneath his feet with every step, a ghost of a man in gray work clothes, invisible to everyone who would soon rush past without a glance. Joseph was 34 years old, though some mornings he felt older. His hands were rough, his knuckles cracked from years of cleaning products in cold weather. He had a strong jaw and quiet brown eyes that held something most people never noticed: intelligence. Not the kind that came from boardrooms or business degrees, but the kind earned through hard years and harder lessons. He had learned to carry his life gently, the way a man carries something fragile that he cannot afford to drop. His phone buzzed once in his breast pocket. He already knew who it was. He leaned the mop handle against the wall and pulled the phone out carefully, tilting the screen so the light wouldn't disturb the empty corridor. "Daddy, I had the dream again. The one with the blue horse." He smiled. 6 years old, and Lily still texted like she was sending a telegram. Precise, a little formal, as if words were precious things that shouldn't be wasted. He typed back quickly. "The blue horse is a good sign. Go back to sleep, baby. I'll be home before you wake up." He watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, then appear again. Promise? Promise. He held the phone a moment longer than necessary, looking at her last message the way a man looks at the one thing in his life that makes every other thing worth doing. Then he slid it back into his pocket and picked up the mop. Lily had been 6 for 3 weeks now. Her birthday had fallen on a Thursday, which meant Joseph had worked a double shift the day before to make sure he had enough for the small chocolate cake from the bakery on 9th Avenue, the one with the rainbow sprinkles she had been asking about since February. He'd gotten home at 2 in the morning, set the cake on the kitchen counter with a single candle in it, and sat down at the table just to look at it for a while, alone in the quiet apartment, feeling something that existed somewhere between exhaustion and gratitude. He had made it another year. She had made it another year. That was enough to celebrate. Her mother had left when Lily was 11 months old. There was no dramatic scene, no final argument. Sarah had simply come home one evening, set her keys on the counter with the particular kind of care that means someone is making a decision, and told him she wasn't built for this life. She didn't mean it cruelly. Joseph had always believed that. She was 24 and scared and honest about it, which was more than some people could manage. She had signed over full custody without a fight, sent money sporadically for the first 2 years, and then the deposits stopped and Joseph stopped waiting for them. He had packed their lives into a 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx and built everything from there. 1 job became 2. 2 became 1 better one when he got the contract position at Hale Tower through a cleaning services company. The pay was steady, the hours were reliable, and the building was safe. Joseph had learned that safe mattered more than impressive. He turned the corner at the end of the hallway and stopped. The lights in the executive conference room were on. That was wrong. The 42nd floor executive suite was always dark until 7 at the earliest. Joseph had memorized the rhythms of this building, the way sailors memorize tides. He knew which floors lit up first, which executives arrived before their assistants, which janitors cut corners on the east stairwell. This floor was always his and his alone until the sun came up properly. He approached slowly, keeping the mop cart to one side. Through the glass panels beside the conference room door, he could see a figure standing at the far end of the long table. A woman. Her back was to him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her posture rigid in a way that looked less like composure and more like a person physically holding themselves together. It was Victoria Hale. He recognized her immediately, though he had never been this close. He had seen her in the building often enough, in elevators, crossing lobbies, moving through corridors surrounded by assistants who orbited her like small anxious planets. She was 28, though she carried herself like someone who had decided age was simply a number with no authority over her. She was blonde, sharp-featured, dressed always in clothes that looked like they had been designed specifically for her body. She had the kind of beauty that didn't invite warmth, precise, deliberate like everything else about her. Joseph had noticed her, the way any person notices someone who radiates a particular kind of controlled intensity. He had also, in the quiet, professional way of someone who understands invisible boundaries, never looked twice. He should have moved on. That was the correct thing to do. He should have backed the cart quietly away and returned when she was gone. Instead, the door opened. Victoria turned at the sound, and for a single unguarded moment, before the composure snapped back into place, Joseph saw something in her face that he recognized with a jolt of unexpected familiarity. He had seen it in the mirror years ago when Lily was 8 months old and running a fever, and Joseph had been sitting in an emergency room at midnight with $12 in his wallet and no one to call. It was the face of a person who has just realized that the plan they have been holding together with both hands is starting to come apart. Then her eyes focused on him and the mask returned. "You," she said. Her voice was flat and controlled. "The night cleaning crew." "Yes, ma'am." He kept his voice low. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I didn't realize anyone was up here. I'll come back later." "Wait." He stopped. Victoria Hale looked at him for a long moment with an expression he couldn't read. She had a legal pad on the table behind her, covered in handwriting. Her phone lay face down beside it. Whatever she had been doing up here alone at 5:30 in the morning, it had something to do with the tight, controlled tension running through every line of her body. "What's your name?" she asked. "Joseph. Joseph Miller." She looked at him carefully, the way a chess player looks at the board before an unexpected move. Then she said something that Joseph would replay in his mind for days afterward, turning it over slowly, examining each word. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I may need to ask you something very unusual. And I need you to hear me out completely before you respond." He did not move. He did not speak. He simply looked at her and waited, because Joseph Miller had learned a long time ago that the most powerful thing a person can do in a moment of uncertainty is refuse to fill the silence. She set her hands flat on the conference table and took a breath. "I have a meeting today at 10 o'clock, she said, "with a man named Gerald Marsh. He controls the single largest investment that my company has ever pursued, $15 million. This deal has taken 14 months to negotiate." She paused. "3 months ago, during a dinner that I did not handle particularly well, I told Gerald Marsh that I was married. It was a spontaneous decision in the middle of a conversation where he made clear that he prefers to invest in people with stable personal lives." She said the last 4 words like she was reading a foreign language she found faintly ridiculous. "He has since made 3 references to meeting my husband. Today, he is coming here, to this office, and he will expect to be introduced." Joseph said nothing. The hallway hummed quietly around them. "I need someone to stand in that room for 2 hours and present themselves as my husband," Victoria said. "Not to speak at length, not to negotiate, simply to exist credibly in that space. Shake hands. Answer basic questions if pressed. Be composed." Her eyes moved over him with a directness that was not unkind, but was entirely unsentimental. "You are here. You are a man. You are apparently capable of working in silence without causing disruption, which suggests a certain discipline. I am prepared to offer you $2,000 in cash for 2 hours of your time." The number landed in the air between them. Joseph looked at her steadily. $2,000 was 6 weeks of Lily's after-school care. It was the security deposit he needed to move them to the slightly larger apartment on the 3rd floor of their building. The one with the window in the 2nd room where he had always imagined Lily would grow up doing homework in natural light. He breathed once, slowly. "Ms. Hale," he said, "I appreciate what you're offering, but I need to ask you one question before I give you an answer." Something shifted in her expression. She had expected either an immediate yes or an immediate no. She had not expected a question. "Go ahead," she said. Joseph looked at her calmly. "If this man finds out, and these things have a way of coming out, what happens to you?" She blinked. It was the only visible response, but it was enough. "That's my concern," she said carefully. It is, he agreed. But it's also mine. Because if I walk into that room with you, whatever comes after belongs to both of us. The silence stretched out between them, and somewhere in that silence, something changed. Joseph couldn't have said what exactly. Only that Victoria Hale was looking at him differently now. Not as a solution to a problem, but as a person who had just said something she hadn't anticipated and didn't entirely know what to do with. "You haven't said no," she said finally. "No," he agreed. "I haven't." Her phone buzzed on the table. "Dawn?" She looked at it, then back at him. "I need your answer by 8 o'clock, she said. "Leave word with the reception desk on this floor. Ask for Elena. She'll know how to reach me." She picked up her legal pad and her phone, and for a moment she stood very close to him as she moved toward the door. Then she paused without turning around. "Your daughter," she said quietly. "You mentioned her in the elevator 3 weeks ago. To one of your colleagues. She just turned 6? Joseph stilled. "Yes," he said. Victoria Hale said nothing more. She walked out of the conference room and disappeared around the corner. And Joseph was left alone with the humming lights and the gleaming floor, and a decision that felt in the particular weighted way of certain moments, like it might be the kind that changes everything. He stood there for a long time. Then he picked up his mop and finished the hallway. The Bronx apartment was quiet when Joseph got home at 6:45. He moved through it without turning on lights, knowing the layout by memory and instinct. The coat hook beside the door, the 3 steps to the kitchen, the particular creak of the 4th floorboard that he had learned to step around so as not to wake Lily. He put the kettle on low and sat at the kitchen table in the early morning gray. Still in his work clothes, his hands flat on the surface in front of him. He thought about $2,000. Then he thought about Lily. Those 2 thoughts were not separate things. They had not been separate things for 6 years, which was both the weight of his life and, if he was honest on his most clear-eyed days, the thing that had kept him from disappearing into something smaller. When you are responsible for another person, truly responsible, the kind where there is no one else to catch them if you drop them, a certain clarity comes with it. You don't have the luxury of making decisions based on fear or pride alone. You have to be practical. You have to be strategic. And sometimes, Joseph had found, you have to be willing to walk through a door that makes no logical sense, because the door that makes perfect logical sense is closed. He pulled out his phone and looked at Lily's last message from the night before. The blue horse. He had started telling her the blue horse story when she was 3, during a week when she had been sick with a bad fever and unable to sleep. He had sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and made up a story about a wild blue horse that lived in a meadow at the edge of a magical forest. And the horse could only be seen by people who were brave enough to be afraid. He had no idea where it came from. It had simply appeared, the way the best things do, out of necessity. Lily had listened with her eyes half closed, her small hand finding his in the dark. And when she finally fell asleep, her breathing had been steady and deep. She had asked for the blue horse story nearly every night for a year after that. He had built an entire world around it. The meadow, the forest, the people who came looking for the horse, and what they found when they finally stopped running and stood still. He thought sometimes that he had told more truth in those stories than in most of his actual conversations. He heard the soft sounds of her waking up just after 7, the small thump of feet hitting the floor, the shuffle across the hallway, the bathroom door. Then her voice, still rough with sleep. "Daddy?" "Kitchen," he said. She appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, the ones with the small yellow suns on them that she had chosen herself from the discount bin at Target, with an expression of absolute certainty, the way she made most of her decisions. She was small for her age, fine-boned, with Joseph's brown eyes and her mother's determined chin. Her hair was tangled from sleep, and she was carrying the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2, holding it by one ear the way she always did when she was still half in dreams. "You're still in your work clothes," she observed. "I am," he agreed. "I was thinking." She climbed into the chair across from him with the ease of long practice and set the rabbit on the table. "About what?" Joseph looked at his daughter for a moment. 6 years old, and already she could read the quality of a silence. He wasn't sure if that was something she had been born with or something she had learned from growing up mostly with him, learning to pay attention to what was said in the spaces between words. "About a choice I have to make today," he said. She considered this seriously. "Is it a hard choice or a confusing choice?" "What's the difference?" he asked. Genuinely curious. "A hard choice," she said, with the authority of someone who has thought about this, "is when you know what you should do, but you don't want to. A confusing choice is when you don't know what you should do at all." Joseph smiled. "Somewhere in between," he said. She nodded, satisfied with this answer, and reached for the banana he had set on the table for her. "The blue horse always knows what to do," she said, "because he's not afraid of being afraid." He looked at her. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been this smart," she said. "You just keep being surprised." He laughed, a real laugh, quiet and warm, and the tightness in his chest eased by degrees. He got up to pour her cereal and stood at the counter while she ate, watching the morning light begin to come through the window over the sink, thin and gold and tentative, the way mornings come in March. By 7:45 he had dropped her at school, kissed her forehead at the gate, and taken the subway back downtown. He found the reception desk on the 42nd floor at 7:58 and asked for Elena. Elena was a small, very efficient woman of about 50 who looked at him with an expression that gave nothing away. She picked up her desk phone, murmured something into it, then set it down. "Ms. Hale will see you in the small conference room," Elena said. "Second door on the left." The small conference room was nothing like the large one where he had found Victoria in the early morning dark. This one had no long table, no glass panels, no skyline view. It was a working room. A round table, 4 chairs, a whiteboard with faint remnants of an erased diagram. Victoria was already there when he walked in, standing beside the window with a cup of coffee in her hand. She had changed from whatever she had been wearing at 5:30 into something sharply tailored. Dark navy, her hair pulled back with the precision of someone who understood that appearance is its own argument. She looked at him without speaking. "I'll do it," Joseph said. Something moved through her expression, not relief exactly, but a loosening of tension, like a rope given a half-turn of slack. "Good," she said. "I have conditions," he added. She set her coffee down. "Of course you do. Nothing dishonest beyond the basic premise," he said. "I won't fabricate stories or lie about details. If he asks direct questions I'm not comfortable answering, I'll defer to you. And if at any point it becomes clear this is going sideways in a way that could cause real damage to either of us, I walk out. Those are the terms." Victoria studied him. "You're a janitor setting conditions with the CEO of a $40 million company," she said. It wasn't contemptuous. It was, if anything, almost bemused. "You approached me," he said simply. A pause. Then, "Fair enough. Agreed." She moved to the table and sat down. And Joseph sat across from her. And for the next hour she briefed him with the clipped efficiency of someone accustomed to preparing people for high-stakes situations. Gerald Marsh, 61, had built his wealth through a combination of commercial real estate and a portfolio of mid-sized technology investments. He was traditional, paternalistic in a way he was probably unaware of, and placed significant value on what he described as character and stability in the people he funded. He had met Victoria 4 times. Each time he had asked about her personal life, with an insistence that she had found frustrating and he had apparently found essential. She spoke about the lie with no self-pity and no particular shame. She had told it. It had been expedient. Now it needed to be managed. The pragmatism was almost admirable in its cleanness. "He knows your name," she said. "I told him Joseph. He knows I'm relatively newly married, which accounts for why I haven't mentioned it more. I told him we met through mutual friends." She paused. "I didn't give many specifics, which means you have room to be general." "What do I do for work?" Joseph asked. Victoria looked at him. "You work in property development consulting," she said without hesitation. "Independent contractor. Project-based work. It explains variable schedules and the fact that you're not easily searchable." She slid a single printed sheet across the table. "Basic background notes. Read it, then give it back to me. You won't have it in the room. Joseph read the sheet carefully. It was spare and intelligent, just enough information to be credible, not enough to be tripped up by specifics. He noticed she had given him characteristics that weren't entirely fabricated. Joseph Miller, who had spent 3 years working construction before the cleaning contracts, who understood building codes and renovation timelines, who had attended 2 years of community college before money ran out. The version of him on that page was not Joseph exactly, but it was close enough to inhabit. He looked up. "You did your homework," he said. Something flickered in her eyes. "I had a few hours," she said. He gave her the sheet back. At 9:45, Elena came to the door. "Mr. Marsh has arrived." "Ms. Hale." Victoria stood, straightened her jacket with a single precise motion and looked at Joseph. "Ready?" she asked. Joseph thought of Lily and the blue horse that wasn't afraid of being afraid. "Yes," he said. They walked out into the hallway together, and for the first time in Joseph Miller's adult life, he walked into a room as someone the world was expected to believe in. Gerald Marsh was the kind of man who took up more space than his physical size warranted. He was of average height, broad through the shoulders, with white hair combed back and the settled, watchful quality of someone who had spent decades reading rooms and people. He wore a jacket that cost more than Joseph's monthly rent, and shook hands with the particular firmness of a man who believes character is transmitted through grip. He turned to Joseph the moment they were introduced, and something in his expression did a quiet recalibration, the kind that happens when a person's expectations and reality briefly fail to match. Joseph saw it, understood it, and held the man's gaze without either challenging or deflecting it. "Joseph," Marsh said, extending his hand. "Gerald Marsh. I've heard almost nothing about you, which means either Victoria is very private or you're very new." "Both are true," Joseph said and shook his hand cleanly. "She's better at keeping things separate than most people I know." Marsh smiled. It was a real smile, not a polished one. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in this building." He glanced at Victoria. "I like him." Victoria's expression shifted in the smallest way, a fractional easing around the eyes that Joseph suspected only he was close enough to notice. She gestured to the seats at the main conference table. "Shall we sit?" The meeting was structured around a formal presentation of Hale Strategy's most recent development phase: expansion into health technology infrastructure in 3 mid-size American cities. 2 of Victoria's senior associates, a man named Derek and a woman named Priya, moved through the slides with polished efficiency. Joseph sat to Victoria's left, slightly back from the table, present but not performing. He had understood immediately that his role was atmospheric, proof of a life outside the office, evidence of a person capable of attachment and stability. Gerald Marsh didn't need him to be impressive. He needed him to be real. About 40 minutes in, while Priya was walking through a projected revenue model, Marsh leaned back slightly in his chair and turned to Joseph with the casual ease of a man who has been waiting for his actual question. "What do you make of all this?" he asked. His voice was conversational, inclusive, the tone of someone asking a family member what they think of the new car. Joseph glanced at the screen, then at Marsh, then answered without looking at Victoria. "Honestly, I think the most interesting part is the staffing model in Tier 2 cities," he said. "The revenue projections are solid, but they assume a hiring pipeline that doesn't currently exist at that scale in places like Akron or Raleigh. The model works if you can build local infrastructure simultaneously, which I think they can, but it requires patience that most investors don't have." A beat of silence. Derek and Priya had both gone slightly still. Marsh looked at Joseph with fresh attention. "And you think Victoria has that patience?" Joseph considered the question. "I think she has something better than patience," he said. "I think she has tolerance for the long view because she's already paid the cost of it. People who've actually built something without a safety net understand that the timeline is the price of the outcome." Marsh held his gaze for a moment. Then he turned to Victoria and said, with something that sounded almost like warmth, "Your husband is more interesting than my analysts." The meeting continued. The presentation concluded. Elena appeared with coffee and a plate of pastries that no one touched except Marsh, who took two with the unself-conscious appetite of a man comfortable in his own skin. The conversation shifted, lighter now, the formal pitch behind them, and Marsh asked about the building's renovations, about the Midtown real estate market, about Joseph's consulting work in a general way that Joseph navigated carefully, staying in the shallower water where he was confident, steering away from specifics with the practiced ease of someone used to managing what they reveal. At one point, Marsh asked, "Marsh, do you two have children?" The room changed temperature by 2 degrees. Victoria opened her mouth. "Not yet," Joseph said, calmly, easily, the way a man says it who has thought about it and made peace with the answer. "We're still finding our footing. We want to get things right before we take that step." Marsh nodded slowly. "Wise," he said. "The world needs more people who think before they act." He was looking at Joseph when he said it, and there was something in the look that was harder to read than simple approval. After Marsh left, 2 hours and 12 minutes after he arrived, having shaken Victoria's hand for an extra beat at the door and told her his team would be in touch by the end of the week, the conference room was very quiet. Derek and Priya gathered their materials and excused themselves with the practiced invisibility of people who understand when a room needs to be empty. Victoria stood at the window, her back to Joseph, looking at the Manhattan skyline with her arms crossed in that same posture he had seen at 5:30 that morning. Outside, the March sky was pale and flat, the city moving below them in its relentless, indifferent way. Joseph began to gather his jacket from the chair. "The part about the Tier 2 cities," Victoria said without turning around. "That wasn't in the briefing I gave you." "No," he said. "You actually understood the presentation." "I read buildings for a living," he said. "Not the financial models, but the structure. You learn to see where the weight is going to land." She turned. She was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Not the calculation of the early morning, not the controlled composure of the meeting. Something more unguarded than either. "You should sit down," she said. "Ms. Hale." "Victoria." She said it firmly. "At this point, I think we're past Ms. Hale." He sat. She sat across from him, and for a moment she was quiet in a way that felt like something being decided internally. Then she reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and slid a folded envelope across the table. "Your 2,000, she said. He picked it up, started to put it in his pocket. "There's 2,500 in there," she said. "The extra 500 is because you answered his question better than I would have." Joseph paused, looked at her. "I don't need the extra 500. "Consider it a professional fee," she said. "Don't make it complicated." He thought about the security deposit. He thought about the window in the third-floor apartment where Lily would do her homework in the afternoon light. He put the envelope in his pocket. "What happens if Marsh calls back?" he asked. Victoria's expression changed in a way he couldn't entirely define. "I've been thinking about that since about 45 minutes into the meeting," she said. "When you said the part about the long view and the cost of outcomes," she paused. "That was about yourself. It wasn't a question." Joseph was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. She nodded slowly, as if something had been confirmed. "Marsh is going to want to meet you again. He's going to attach his impression of you to his impression of me, which means you've become part of the pitch whether either of us planned it that way." "That's a problem," Joseph said. "Or an opportunity," Victoria said, and something in the way she said it, careful, almost reluctant, made Joseph understand that she was saying something she hadn't fully decided yet, the way you say something out loud to find out if it's true. The silence between them was different from the silences of that morning, less tense, more complicated. Joseph stood up. "I need to pick up my daughter by 3:30, he said. Victoria looked at him. "Every day?" "Every day," he said. She was quiet for a beat. "I'll have Elena get your contact information," she said. "If that's acceptable." He looked at her steadily. "You already have it," he said. "You did your homework, remember?" For the first time since he had known her, which was exactly 1 full day, Victoria Hale almost smiled. Joseph walked out into the hallway and took the elevator down alone. He stood in the lobby of Hale Tower with the envelope in his pocket. and the particular feeling that comes from having walked through an uncertain door and found on the other side. Not the floor you expected, but a staircase, leading somewhere you hadn't planned to go, in a direction you couldn't yet see. Outside, the March air was cold and tasted of the city. He turned up his collar and walked toward the subway. He had 2 hours before he needed to be at Lily's school. He thought about Victoria's expression when she almost smiled. He thought about Marsh's eyes when he looked at Joseph and said, "Your husband is more interesting than my analysts." He thought about a wild blue horse standing in a meadow, visible only to people brave enough to be afraid. The subway came and Joseph Miller got on. And somewhere on the 42nd floor of Hale Tower, a woman who had spent 10 years making sure she needed no one opened her laptop, stared at the screen without reading it, and thought about a man who had answered a question no one had prepared him for, and told the truth anyway. 3 days passed before Elena called. Joseph was in the supply closet on the 38th floor, doing an inventory count of cleaning products for the monthly report, when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Miller." Elena's voice was crisp and professional. "Ms. Hale would like to schedule a brief meeting at your earliest convenience. Would tomorrow morning work for you?" 9 o'clock. He looked at his inventory clipboard. He thought about his afternoon shift, which started at noon. He thought about the fact that whatever Victoria Hale wanted to say to him at 9 in the morning was almost certainly connected to Gerald Marsh, which meant it was connected to $15 million and a lie that had now acquired a shape and a face and a social security number it didn't actually have. 9 o'clock is fine, he said. He showed up at 8:58, which was his habit. He had not come in his work clothes. He owned 3 shirts that he would describe as presentable. He wore the dark blue one, with the gray jacket he reserved for school events and the 2 job interviews he had gone on in the last 4 years. He was aware, walking through the lobby, that he looked different than he did at 5:30 in the morning with a mop. He was also aware that it shouldn't matter, and that it did anyway, and that being aware of both of those things at the same time was part of what it meant to move through the world in his particular position. Victoria was already in the small conference room. She was standing this time, and she had 2 cups of coffee on the table, which was, Joseph understood, a deliberate gesture, the kind a person makes when they want to establish that this is a conversation between equals and not a briefing. He sat down and took the coffee. "Gerald Marsh called me yesterday," she said, sitting across from him. "He's moving forward with the investment." Joseph said nothing. He waited. "He also asked if the 4 of us might have dinner." She held his gaze steadily. "He and his wife, Claudia, you and I." Joseph set his coffee down slowly. "You told him no." "I told him I would check your schedule," she said, which is not the same as no. He looked at her. "Victoria, a meeting in a conference room with a clean exit is one thing. A dinner is something else entirely. His wife will be there. Wives ask different questions than investors." "I know that," she said. And something in her voice had lost its usual certainty by a precise measured degree. Not much, but enough. "Do you want me to say no for you?" he asked. The question surprised her. He could see it. It was not the question she had expected, which meant she had arrived at this meeting expecting a negotiation. Terms, compensation, logistics. And he had instead offered her a way out, and she didn't quite know what to do with that. "I'm not accustomed to people offering me exits," she said carefully. "Most people in your position aren't," he said. "They're offered more of what they already have." He paused. "But you didn't call me in here to tell me the deal closed. You called me in because you're standing at a fork and you're not sure which way to go, and you thought talking it through with someone who has nothing to gain from your answer might help." A long silence. "You're very direct," she said. "I have a 6-year-old, he said. "I don't have time for the other kind." Victoria looked at him for a moment with an expression that was not quite amusement and not quite something else. Then she exhaled, a single controlled breath, and said, "I want to do the dinner." "Why?" "Because Marsh didn't just commit $15 million based on my presentation," she said. "He committed it based on his impression of you, which means you are now, whether I planned it that way or not, load-bearing. And that fact is going to require management either way. We can either manage it by extending the arrangement in a controlled manner, or by declining the dinner and hoping he doesn't look too closely at why. Joseph considered this. And if his wife is perceptive? Claudia Marsh was a family therapist for 20 years before she retired, Victoria said. She is almost certainly perceptive. He laughed. He couldn't help it. A short, genuine sound that caught her slightly off guard. You knew that when you accepted the original meeting, he said. I did, she admitted. And you still decided to go ahead with it. I had limited options and a hard deadline, she said, with the precision of someone who has made peace with an imperfect decision, without pretending it was perfect. I still do. Joseph was quiet for a moment. He was thinking about Lily, which was what he did when decisions required the clearest possible version of his thinking. He thought about what she would say. She would probably ask whether it was a hard choice or a confusing choice. He was beginning to think it was neither, that it was actually a simpler question underneath the complicated ones. The way most things were when you stripped them down to what actually mattered. I have a condition, he said. Another one, she said, not unkindly. At the dinner, if Claudia Marsh asks about Lily, about our daughter, I'm going to answer honestly, not about the arrangement, but about her real name, her real age, what she's actually like. I'm not going to pretend she doesn't exist or build a version of her that isn't real. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. It was subtle and swift, and he almost missed it. But he had learned in 3 days that Victoria Hale communicated most clearly in the things she almost didn't show. Okay, she said quietly. She means more to me than $2,000, he said. Not harshly, just as a fact. I understand, Victoria said. And he believed her. The dinner was scheduled for the following Friday. Joseph spent the intervening days in his regular pattern, early morning shifts at Hale Tower, pickup at 3:30, evenings with Lily doing homework at the kitchen table, stories before bed. He told her about a new challenge the Blue Horse was facing, one that involved crossing a river that looked too wide to cross but turned out to have stepping stones just below the surface, invisible until you were willing to get your feet wet. Lily listened with absolute attention, and then said, Did the horse know the stones were there? No, Joseph said. But he crossed anyway? He crossed anyway. She was quiet for a moment in the particular way she got quiet when she was processing something. Then, I think the stones were always there, she said. He just needed to start crossing before he could see them. Joseph looked at his daughter. In the low lamp of her bedroom, with her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm and her dark eyes steady and certain, she looked for just a moment, like the most complete thing in the world. I think you're right, he said. The restaurant Gerald Marsh chose for dinner was on the Upper East Side, the kind of place where the lighting was warm and deliberately low, and the menus had no prices on the side presented to guests. Joseph had been to exactly one restaurant like it in his life, for a colleague's retirement dinner 7 years ago, and he had spent the whole meal reading the room more than the menu. He was doing the same thing now, though with considerably higher stakes. Claudia Marsh was 70, small-framed, with silver hair and pale green eyes that moved around a room the way a doctor's hands move over a patient, gently, systematically, looking for what isn't immediately visible. She had taken Joseph's hand in both of hers when they were introduced, and held it for just a moment longer than a standard greeting. And he had understood immediately that Victoria had not been exaggerating. Victoria tells me almost nothing about her personal life, Claudia said to Joseph over the first course pleasantly, the way someone says something that is exactly as direct as it sounds. Which means I've been curious about you since Gerald mentioned you. That's fair, Joseph said. She's the same way with me. Claudia's eyes moved to him with brief, bright attention. And that doesn't bother you? It used to, he said. Now I think it's part of how she protects the things that matter to her. He glanced at Victoria across the table, a practiced, easy glance, the kind between people who have settled into a shared understanding of each other. The things she lets through are the ones she means. Victoria was looking at her water glass, but the line of her jaw had changed. Gerald was talking to her about the infrastructure project, pulling her into a professional conversation with the ease of a man who genuinely respected what she'd built. And for a few minutes, Claudia and Joseph were in a quieter orbit at their end of the table. Gerald says you have a little girl, Claudia said. Lily, Joseph said. The name came out with the particular warmth he had never been able to keep out of it, no matter the context. She just turned 6. That's a wonderful age, Claudia said. Still believes everything is possible. She thinks the rules are negotiable, Joseph said, which I suspect is both her greatest strength and my biggest long-term challenge. Claudia laughed, a real laugh, full and unguarded. She sounds extraordinary. She is, he said simply. She's the best thing I've ever done. He did not say, she is the only thing I've built entirely on my own that no one can take away. He did not say every decision I've made for 6 years has been measured against her first. He didn't need to. Some things are communicated without words, especially to people trained to listen for them. Claudia was looking at him with a warmth that was also, unmistakably, an evaluation. You love being her father, she said. It's the most important job I have, he said. Claudia glanced across the table at Victoria, then back at Joseph. Does she know that? She asked softly. Victoria? He held the older woman's gaze. She's learning, he said. And across the table, as if she had heard every word through the din of Gerald's infrastructure projections, Victoria looked up from her water glass and met Joseph's eyes. She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she turned back to Gerald's question, but her shoulders had dropped by exactly 1 inch. And Claudia Marsh, who had spent 20 years in a room listening to the things people said when they thought they were saying something else, set her fork down very gently and smiled at the table. The investment paperwork was signed on Monday morning. The week after the papers were signed, Joseph came to work on a Tuesday morning and found an envelope in the cleaning crew locker with his name on it. Not his employee number, not his assigned station, his name written in handwriting he already recognized. Inside was a single card. No Hale Strategies letterhead, no company branding, just a piece of ivory notepaper, and on it, in Victoria's precise script, the role you played in closing that deal was real. So was the contribution. Thank you. He stood in the locker room with the card in his hand for a long moment. Then he put it in his breast pocket, beside his phone, and went to work. That same morning, 3 floors above where Joseph was mopping the executive hallway, something else was beginning. A man named Richard Callow, who was Hale Strategies' chief operating officer and had been with the company for 6 years, was sitting across a desk from Victoria and saying things that were careful and measured and, underneath the carefulness, threatening. Joseph didn't know any of this yet. He found out the way he found out most things about the building's upper floors, gradually, through the particular osmosis of a person who is present, but presumed invisible. He heard it first from Darnell, the security guard on the 40th floor, who took his coffee break at the same time as Joseph on most days. Darnell had 15 years of watching people in that building, which had given him an accurate and unsentimental understanding of its internal weather. Something's going on up top, Darnell said on the second Wednesday after the Marsh deal. COO's been in her office 3 times this week. Doors closed. Her assistant looks like she ate something bad. Joseph filed it without responding. He heard it again on Friday from a woman on the administrative floor named Grace, who was the kind of person who didn't gossip, but did occasionally state observable facts. There's a leadership meeting Monday that wasn't on the calendar 2 weeks ago, Grace said. Not to Joseph specifically, but in his general vicinity, which with Grace was the same as telling him directly. He finished the hallway and went home. That weekend, Lily had a school project about community helpers, the kind of assignment designed for 6-year-olds where you drew a picture of someone whose work helped people and wrote 2 sentences about them. She had decided, with the certainty she brought to all important decisions, that she was going to draw her father. But your picture has to show what they do, Joseph said, reading the assignment sheet at the kitchen table. I know, Lily said, already drawing. He watched her work. She drew with her tongue between her teeth, pressing hard on the crayon the way she always did, as if the picture needed to be convinced to come out right. She drew a man with a mop. She drew a tall building behind him with many windows. She drew in the upper windows small figures of people at desks. Then she drew, very carefully, a circle of light around the man with the mop. "What's the circle?" Joseph asked. "That's so people can see him," Lily said matter-of-factly. He looked at the drawing for a long time. "What are your 2 sentences?" he asked. She wrote them slowly, her handwriting large and careful. "My dad cleans buildings so they are beautiful for everyone. He does it every night, even when nobody says thank you." Joseph pressed his lips together briefly. "That's very good," he said. "I know," she said, and went back to coloring. He called in to work that Monday with a personal day, the first he'd taken in 11 months, because Lily had a fever of 101, and the school had called at 8 in the morning. He sat beside her bed reading to her from the Blue Horse stories. The real ones now, the ones he had started actually writing down last winter in a spiral notebook because she had asked him to. He read for 2 hours and she slept through most of it, which meant it was working. By 2 in the afternoon, her fever had broken, and she was sitting up asking for soup and telling him about a dream she'd had in which the Blue Horse learned to swim. His phone rang at 2:45. "Victoria." He stepped into the hallway and answered. "Hey." A pause, brief, but there. "You're not here today." She said it as an observation, not a complaint. "Lily's sick," he said. "Fever. She's okay now." Another pause. "I'm glad she's okay." The words were slightly careful, the way words are when a person is saying something they mean but aren't entirely used to saying. "Thank you," he said. "What's going on?" The shift in the air was palpable even through the phone. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said. "Not over the phone. Can you come in tomorrow?" "I'll be in at 5:30, he said. "Come to the office at 8, please." He went in at 8. Elena met him at the elevator, which was itself unusual, Elena meeting people at the elevator, and brought him directly to Victoria's office, the real one, the corner office on the 44th floor that he had never been in before. It had floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides and a desk of pale wood, and a view of the city that was, objectively, breathtaking, and Victoria was standing in the middle of it looking like a person who had not slept well. She looked at him when he came in. Then she said, "Richard Callow is leaving the company. He's taken 3 of our senior analysts with him. He's also, I believe, taken a significant amount of proprietary strategic data, which my legal team is currently working to confirm." Joseph sat down slowly. "He's been in preliminary talks with a competitor for 4 months, she said. I didn't see it. I was focused on the Marsh deal and the infrastructure expansion, and I didn't see what was building in my own organization." She said it without self-pity and without deflection, the same way she had told him about the lie 3 weeks ago, cleanly because she had decided honesty was the more efficient option. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad enough to be serious, not bad enough to be fatal." She paused. "Probably." He looked at her. "What do you need?" She met his eyes. "That's the second time you've asked me that," she said. "It's a useful question," he said. She moved to the window and stood looking out at the city for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "I've been running this company since I was 23 years old. I started it from a consulting contract and a $1,200 laptop, and I built it to what it is by being harder and faster and more focused than everyone around me. I don't ask for help. I don't lean on people. I don't let anyone close enough to the structure to affect it." She paused. "And then one morning at 5:30 I turned around, and there was a janitor standing in my hallway, and something made me open the door." Joseph was very still. "I've been thinking about why," she said. "For 3 weeks I've been thinking about it, and I think it was because you didn't look at me the way everyone else in this building looks at me." "How do they look at you?" he asked. "Like I'm a position," she said. "Like I'm a resource or a threat or an outcome. Like I'm the CEO of Hale Strategies first and a person somewhere far behind that." She turned from the window and looked at him directly. "You looked at me like someone who was having a bad night and needed to not be alone with it." The city hummed 44 floors below them. "You weren't just having a bad night," Joseph said. "No," she said. "I wasn't." A pause. "I'm not accustomed to being seen clearly." "I know," he said quietly. "How?" she asked. He thought about how to answer that. He thought about Lily's drawing, the man with the mop, the circle of light, the small figures in the upper windows who might not even notice the light was there. Because people who are used to being seen don't try as hard to stay invisible, he said. You keep everything so controlled. Every word, every posture, every decision, that's not confidence, that's protection. He paused. I know what protection looks like. I've been wearing it a long time too. Victoria looked at him for a long moment with an expression he had never seen on her face before. Unguarded, unmanaged, entirely present. Like a room that had been meticulously furnished for guests, and then, when the guests left, the furniture was moved aside, and you could finally see the actual shape of the walls. I'm going to tell you something, she said, and I need you to hear it as information, not as an offer of anything. Because I don't know yet what it is. Joseph waited. I have not once in my adult life allowed myself to need a person, she said. Not a partner, not a friend, not a mentor. The one time I came close, I was 22, and it ended in a way that convinced me the mathematics of dependence were always net negative. She breathed once. And I am standing here telling you that over the last 3 weeks I've woken up each morning, and the first coherent thought in my head has been something I wanted to tell you. And that has not happened to me since I was 22 years old, and I don't know what to do with it. The silence that followed was the longest Joseph could remember in recent years. He stood up slowly. He walked to where she was standing by the window. He did not touch her. He stood close enough that she would have to look at him, and he looked at her quietly, steadily, the way he looked at things he was trying to understand completely before he acted. You don't have to do anything with it right now, he said. You just had to say it out loud. That's enough for today. Something in her face broke, not collapsed, not fell apart, but broke the way ice breaks in early spring, sudden and inevitable, and full of the promise of what comes after. Her eyes went bright for one moment, and she turned back to the window before it could become something else. I owe you an apology, she said to the glass. For what? He asked. For the morning I approached you, she said. I used you. I saw a solution to a problem, and I used you without thinking about what it might cost you. That wasn't right. Joseph considered this. You were desperate, he said. Desperate people don't always lead with their best selves. I know that. He paused. I also wasn't exactly unhappy to be asked. She turned at that, a quick, sharp look. You needed someone to see you, he said simply. And I was there. And I think, if I'm being honest, I needed someone to see me too. We did each other a favor, even if neither of us would have put it that way at the time. The city spread out below them, gray and luminous and indifferent to both of them, the way cities are. What happens now? She asked, and her voice was lower and less certain than he had ever heard it. Joseph turned toward the door. He looked back at her once, just once. Now you call your legal team and handle Richard Callow, he said. And tomorrow morning at 5:30 I'll be back on the 42nd floor. He paused. And the morning after that, and the one after that. He walked to the door. Joseph. He stopped. Lily's drawing, Victoria said. The one from her school project. Elena mentioned it. You told Darnell, who told the front desk, and it made its way up. She paused. The circle of light. He waited. She sees you exactly right, Victoria said. He nodded once. Then he walked out. And Victoria Hale stood at her window 44 floors above the city and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the specific and terrifying sensation of a wall coming down from the inside. The Richard Callow situation moved quickly after that. Victoria's legal team confirmed the data breach within 48 hours. By the end of the following week, a cease and desist had been filed, and Callow's new employer, a mid-sized strategy firm with ambitions larger than its ethics, had received notice of pending litigation. The analysts who had left with him sent quiet, careful emails to Victoria's HR director within the month, asking about the possibility of returning. She didn't take them back. But she didn't burn the bridges either. She replied to each one personally, briefly, and without rancor, and said that the door was not open right now, but that she wished them well. Joseph heard about this from Elena, who mentioned it the way Elena mentioned most things. as a neutral fact that somehow conveyed an editorial opinion. She used to not respond at all, Elena said, setting a stack of folders on the counter with deliberate composure. Joseph understood this to mean something has changed. He was aware of the change the way you are aware of a season turning, not in a single day but in the accumulation of small things. The coffee on the conference table, the card on ivory notepaper, the way Victoria sometimes paused in the 42nd floor hallway when she came in early, and they exchanged a few words about nothing important, the weather, a piece of news, something Lily had said, before she went up to her office and he went back to his work. He was careful. He had been alone long enough to know what it meant to want something and to know it might not be the right time, or the right shape, or the right version of itself yet. He did not push. He did not assume. He let things be what they were and trusted that the right things had a way of becoming clear on their own schedule. Lily met Victoria on a Saturday in late April. It was not planned. Joseph had a maintenance call in at the building. A burst pipe on the 36th floor required all available cleaning staff on short notice. And it was a weekend, and he had no backup for Lily. He had called the building manager to say he'd come as soon as he could arrange care. 40 minutes later, Victoria had called him. "Bring her," she said. "Victoria, the building has a waiting room on the 28th floor that is extremely well furnished and currently empty," she said. "I have a collection of children's books that a client left here 2 years ago and I've never found a use for. Bring her. I'll make sure she's comfortable." He had stood in his kitchen with the phone against his ear, thinking about all the reasons this was complicated and the one reason it was simple. "Okay," he said. Lily came into the lobby of Hale Tower holding Joseph's hand and looking at the ceiling with the comprehensive attention she gave to anything new. She was wearing the yellow sun pajamas under a blue coat because she had insisted on wearing them, and Joseph had chosen not to make it a conflict, which was one of the 12,000 small parenting decisions he made every week that he would probably never be fully certain about. Victoria was waiting in the 28th floor lobby. She was in weekend clothes, which turned out to mean dark jeans and a cream sweater that probably cost more than a month of Joseph's car insurance. And she looked slightly less like the CEO of Hale Strategies and slightly more like a person who was not entirely sure what to do with her hands. Lily looked up at her with complete assessment. "You're very tall," Lily said. "I am," Victoria agreed. "Your hair's the color of my crayons," Lily said. "The light yellow one." "I'll take that as a compliment," Victoria said. "It is one," Lily said. "I only use that crayon for good things." Something happened on Victoria's face that Joseph had never seen before. A full, unguarded smile, sudden and bright, the kind that a person produces not because the moment calls for it, but because they have been surprised into it. He filed that smile in the part of his memory reserved for things he wanted to keep. Lily spent 2 hours on the 28th floor with the children's books and a small snack Elena had organized from the kitchen. And when Joseph had finished dealing with the pipe situation and come back down, he found Victoria sitting on the floor with his daughter, listening with full attention as Lily explained the blue horse story, her version of it, which had evolved significantly from Joseph's original and now included a talking river, a snow leopard named Frederick, and a recurring subplot about a family of very organized beavers. Victoria looked up at Joseph from the floor with an expression that was, he thought, approximately the opposite of her 5:30 in the morning face. No calculation, no control, no carefully managed distance. Just a woman sitting on the floor in a cream sweater, listening to a 6-year-old. "The beavers are my favorite part," Victoria said seriously. "Everyone thinks it's the horse," Lily said. "But the beavers are the ones who actually solve the problems." "That's because the visible heroes get all the attention," Victoria said, "while the ones doing the real work stay in the background." Lily looked at her with sudden intensity. "My dad does the real work," she said. Victoria looked at Joseph. "Yes," she said. "He does." On a Thursday evening in the middle of May, Joseph was finishing the 42nd floor when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Victoria was standing in the hallway in her coat, bag over her shoulder, clearly on her way out for the evening. She stopped when she saw him. "I have something to tell you," she said. He leaned the mop against the wall and waited. I spoke to the company's HR director this week, she said, about creating a new position, infrastructure operations consultant, someone who bridges our project teams with on-the-ground operational realities. She paused. Real salary, benefits, regular hours. She kept her eyes on his. I'm not offering it to you because of anything personal. I'm offering it because you sat in that room with Gerald Marsh and understood the Tier 2 staffing problem better than the analysts who built the presentation. Because in 6 weeks you have demonstrated more strategic intelligence in passing conversations than most people I interview demonstrate in formal settings. The hallway was very quiet. And because, she said more slowly, I think it is a waste of something rare and significant for a person like you to be invisible. Joseph looked at her for a long time. I'm not invisible, he said finally. My daughter drew a circle of light around me. Victoria smiled, that full, surprised smile again, the one she couldn't manage. She did, she said. She also told me the beavers are the real heroes. She's not wrong. A pause. The kind of pause that is itself a question. Joseph, Victoria said. Yes. I don't know how to do this, she said. Whatever this is. I'm not built for it in the way you seem to be built for things. I'm going to get it wrong sometimes, probably more than sometimes. She breathed. But I've also realized over the last 6 weeks that I've been making a particular mistake for a very long time. What mistake? He asked. Confusing being strong with being alone, she said. They're not the same thing I always thought they were. Joseph looked at this woman, who had built a $40 million company from a laptop, who had lied to a stranger at a business dinner and ended up standing in her own hallway at 5:30 in the morning at the end of her rope, who had sat on a floor in a cream sweater listening to a 6-year-old explain beaver organizational systems, and he felt something settle in his chest, quiet and certain, the way a stepping stone feels underfoot when you've already crossed half the river, and you finally trust that the rest are there. I know, he said. I used to make the same mistake. What changed it? She asked. Lily, he said. She needed me to be strong and present at the same time. You can't do that alone. You have to let someone in. He paused. You've been letting me in for 6 weeks. You just haven't called it that. Victoria looked at the floor for a moment. Then at him. About the position, she said. There's no obligation. It stands entirely on its own. I know that, he said. I'll think about it. And the other thing, she said. That also stands entirely on its own. I'm not... She stopped, tried again. I'm not using one to leverage the other. I know that too, he said. I've known who you are for a while now, Victoria. Not the CEO version. The actual version. She was quiet. The actual version is better, he said. The hall lights hummed. Outside the windows, the May evening was soft and blue, the city beginning to light itself up for the night. Thousands of windows. Thousands of rooms, thousands of lives running alongside each other in the enormous, complicated machinery of a city that never stops. Joseph picked up his mop. I'll give you my answer about the position on Monday, he said. Okay, she said. He began to move down the hallway. Joseph. He stopped. When you tell Lily the next part of the Blue Horse story, Victoria said, will you tell me how it goes? He looked back at her. You can ask her yourself, he said. She tells it better than I do. He rounded the corner and she was behind him, and the floor gleamed ahead in long, clean stretches. And somewhere across the city, a little girl with dark eyes and a stuffed rabbit was sleeping the deep, unworried sleep of a child who knows that whatever the morning brings, her father will be there. He thought about stepping stones you can't see until you're moving. He thought about circles of light. He thought about the particular kind of strength that is not armor but presence, not the refusal to be touched, but the willingness to stand still long enough to be seen. On Monday, Joseph Miller accepted the position. On Monday, he also told Lily that the Blue Horse had found something unexpected on the other side of the river. Not treasure, not victory, not a grand reward. Just a meadow, wide and green, and another traveler who had also been crossing alone, and the particular surprise of discovering that the meadow was better with company. Lily considered this development with her trademark gravity. "Is the other traveler going to stay?" she asked. "I think so," Joseph said. "Good," Lily said. The horse needed someone who could see the meadow the same way he could. She paused. "Not everyone can see it, you know. You have to have looked for it a long time first." Joseph looked at his daughter. 6 years old, bright as morning. Impossibly wise in the way that children are before the world teaches them to doubt themselves. "You're right," he said. "You have to have looked for it a long time." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. And Joseph Miller, who had spent 6 years building a life with his hands and his heart, invisible to the world that rushed past him, carrying more than anyone saw, sat at the kitchen table in the late spring light and felt, for the first time in a long time, that the world was beginning to see him back. And it turned out that being seen, after all, was not something to be afraid of. It was the thing the blue horse had been crossing toward all along.